Hi everyone, my name is Mike, and I am going to share something with you today. It is about blended families and the struggles that come with merging two separate lives into one household. It is also about what happens when grief and resentment crash into each other, leaving everyone bruised and broken in ways that do not heal easily. I found love later in my life, at a time when I had given up on the idea of having a family. I married a woman who had two teenage daughters, and from the moment I stepped into their lives, those girls rejected me. They fought me every step of the way. They made me feel like an intruder in my own home. And when their mother passed away, things got even uglier. They came after everything I had built, believing it all belonged to them. By the time I finish telling you what happened, I want you to sit with it and ask yourself one question. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Let me take you back to the beginning so you can understand how I got here. I had spent the better part of my adult life building a small landscaping business from the ground up. It was not a massive company. I had a crew of about 12 guys, a solid list of clients, and enough contracts to keep the work steady year-round. I had also purchased my home about 10 years before I met her. It was a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. I had no mortgage, no debt, and no one to share it with. I had dated here and there over the years, but nothing ever stuck. Some relationships ended because of my work schedule. Others just fizzled out because we were not the right fit. By the time I hit my early 40s, I had accepted that maybe having a wife and kids was not in the cards for me. I was not bitter about it. I had made peace with it. I figured I would just keep working, enjoy my weekends, and live a quiet life on my own terms. Then I met Elizabeth at a backyard party hosted by a mutual friend. I almost didn't go that day because I had been working a long job all week and was tired, but something told me to show up, so I did. Elizabeth was outstanding when I first saw her. I found reasons to get close to her, and when we started talking, I learned that she was a widow. Her husband had passed away about 7 years earlier from a sudden heart attack. He was only 35 when it happened. She had been left to raise their twin daughters on her own, and by the time I met her, those girls were 13. What struck me about Elizabeth was how she carried herself. She had been through something devastating, but she was not broken by it. She still smiled. She still laughed. She handled everything at home on her own and somehow kept it all together for her daughters. I admired that about her. I admired her strength and her warmth, and I found myself wanting to know more. We exchanged numbers that day, and a few days later, I called her. We went out for dinner, and that dinner turned into another, and then another. Within a few months, we were officially dating. I had not felt that way about anyone in years. She made me feel like I had something to offer beyond my work. About a year into our relationship, I knew I wanted to marry her. I proposed on a quiet evening at my house. I cooked dinner, set up some candles on the back porch, and asked her to be my wife. She said yes with tears in her eyes, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. I thought I was stepping into a new chapter of my life, one filled with love and family. What I did not fully understand at the time was that her daughters were not ready to welcome me into that chapter, and they would spend the next several years making sure I knew it. When Elizabeth and I got married, her daughters, Taylor and Jasmine, were 15 years old. From the very first day I moved into the role of stepfather, those girls made it crystal clear that they did not want me there. They did not yell or throw tantrums. It was more subtle than that, and in some ways, that made it worse. They simply refused to acknowledge me as part of the family. At the dinner table, they would talk to their mother and act like I was not sitting right there. If I asked them a question, they would give one-word answers or just shrug. If I tried to join a conversation, they would suddenly lose interest and leave the room. I was invisible to them, except when they wanted to remind me that I did not belong. They never called me by my name. When they talked about me to their mother, they would say things like, "Is he coming?" or "Why does that guy have to be here?" I heard them say those things more times than I can count, and each time it stung. I understood that they had lost their father at a young age, and that his death had left a wound that never fully healed. I never tried to replace him. I never asked them to call me Dad. I just wanted to be someone they could trust, someone who cared about them and their mother, but they were not interested in giving me that chance. I tried everything I could think of to build a connection with them. I showed up to their school events, even when they pretended not to see me in the crowd. I suggested family outings, but they would find excuses not to go, or they would come along and sit in silence the whole time. I gave them space when they seemed overwhelmed, and I tried to be present when they seemed open to it. Nothing worked. It was like trying to climb a wall made of ice. Every time I thought I was making progress, I would slip right back down to where I started. They had built a barrier around themselves, and I was not allowed past it. The hardest part was watching what this did to Elizabeth. She loved her daughters more than anything in this world, and she loved me, too. She was caught in the middle, constantly trying to keep the peace. I could see how exhausted it made her. Some nights, after the girls had gone to their rooms and the house was quiet, she would sit on the couch and did not have to say anything for me to know what she was feeling. She was torn between the two sides of her heart, and there was nothing I could do to fix it. I hated seeing her like that. It made me question whether marrying her had been the right thing, not because I doubted my love for her, but because I wondered if my presence was causing more harm than good. There were many nights when Elizabeth and I would lie in bed after a long and difficult day, and she would turn to me and ask me to be patient. She would take my hand in hers, look me in the eyes, and explain why her daughters acted the way they did. She told me that when their father died, the girls were only 8 years old. They did not understand what had happened. One day their dad was there, and the next day he was gone, and no one could give them a reason that made sense to their young minds. They never went to therapy. They never had a proper space to grieve. They just pushed the pain down and kept going, because that was what they saw their mother do. Elizabeth told me that my presence in their home, no matter how kind or patient I was, reminded them every single day that their family was no longer what it used to be. I was living proof that their father was gone and that life had moved on without him. She believed that they were not really angry at me as a person. They were angry at the situation, at the loss, at the change. And I just happened to be standing in the middle of it all. She asked me to give them grace. She asked me not to take their cold words and their distance personally, even though I know she understood how much it hurt. She told me that she believed, with all her heart, that time would heal this. She said that one day, when the girls grew up and gained some perspective on life, they would come around. They would see that I was not the villain they had made me out to be. They would recognize that I had stayed, that I had tried, and that I loved their mother through it all. She asked me to trust her on this, and because I loved her, I said yes. I agreed to wait. I agreed to keep trying. I swallowed my pride more times than I can count. I bit my tongue when they said hurtful things under their breath. I stayed calm when they slammed doors or walked out of rooms the moment I entered. I kept showing up to their events, even when they did not want me there. I did all of this because Elizabeth asked me to. I did it because I believed in her and because I wanted so badly for her to be right. When Taylor and Jasmine turned 18, they both left for college. They enrolled at a university about 3 hours away from home, and for the first time in years, the house was quiet. I thought this might be the turning point that Elizabeth had always believed would come. I figured that being away from home, living on their own, meeting new people, and experiencing the world outside of our household might give them a new perspective. Maybe they would start to miss their mother and, in some small way, the life we had all shared together. Maybe they would see that I was not the enemy, and that I had only ever wanted to be part of their family. I held on to that hope for a while, but reality soon proved me wrong. When the girls came home for holidays and school breaks, nothing had changed. They still treated me like a stranger. They still walked past me without saying hello. They still had private conversations with their mother in another room, behind closed doors, as if I were not welcome to hear about their lives. If I asked them how school was going, they gave me short, empty answers. Fine. Okay. Busy. That was all I ever got. I paid for a large portion of their college expenses. I covered their tuition, textbooks, rent for off-campus housing, and living costs. I did this because I loved their mother, and I wanted to ease the financial burden on her. I never expected the girls to worship me for it, but a simple thank you would have meant something. It never came. They took the money and carried on as if it had appeared out of nowhere. 4 years of marriage, and I was still an outsider in my own home. I was still the man who was tolerated but never accepted. And through it all, Elizabeth held on to hope. She kept telling me that one day they would understand. One day they would see me for who I really was. I wanted to believe her, but as the years passed, that belief grew harder and harder to hold on to. Everything changed one Tuesday afternoon. Elizabeth had been feeling tired for a few weeks, more tired than usual, and she had developed a cough that would not go away. She finally went to see her doctor, thinking it was just a stubborn cold, or maybe the start of the flu. I was at work when she called me. Her voice was calm, and she asked me to come home early. She said the doctor wanted to run some more tests, but they had found something on her chest x-ray, a shadow on her lung. I left the job site immediately and drove home. When I walked through the front door and saw her sitting at the kitchen table, her hands folded in her lap, I knew our lives were about to change in ways I was not prepared for. The weeks that followed were filled with appointments, scans, biopsies, and conversations with specialists who used words I had to look up later just to understand. The diagnosis came back as lung cancer, stage 3, already spread to the lymph nodes. Elizabeth had never smoked a day in her life, and the doctors said that sometimes it just happens that way. There is no explanation, no reason, no one to blame. It just happens. They laid out the treatment options, chemotherapy and radiation, and talked about survival rates and timelines. I sat in those appointments, holding Elizabeth's hand, nodding along as if I were absorbing the information, but inside I was falling apart. This was the woman I had built my life around. This was the woman who had given me a reason to come home at the end of the day, and now doctors were telling me that she might not be here a year from now. The following months became a blur of hospital visits and treatment sessions. I stepped back from the business and handed the day-to-day operations over to my foreman. I told him to call me only if something was on fire, because my place was with Elizabeth. I drove her to every chemotherapy appointment and sat beside her in those cold, sterile rooms while poison dripped into her veins in an attempt to kill the thing that was killing her. I held a bucket for her when the nausea hit on the drive home. I helped her to bed when she was too weak to walk on her own. I learned how to cook meals that she could keep down and how to manage her medication schedule so she would not miss a dose. I did not sleep much during those months. I would lie awake at night listening to her breathe, afraid that if I closed my eyes, I might miss the moment when her breathing stopped. Taylor and Jasmine came home when they learned about their mother's diagnosis. They dropped their classes for the semester and moved back into the house, and for a brief time, it felt like we were all united. There was a shared sense of fear and grief that hung over the household, a silent understanding that we were all facing the same terrible reality. I thought that maybe this was the thing that would finally bring us together. And for a few moments here and there, it almost felt like it did. We would sit together in the hospital waiting room, not talking, but at least present in the same space. We would share quiet dinners at the kitchen table, without the usual tension. It was not warmth, but it was not war either, and I took that as a small sign of progress. But even in the middle of all that shared grief, the girls kept me at arm's length. They would step into the hallway with the oncologist and discuss treatment options as if I were not Elizabeth's husband, as if I had no right to be part of those decisions. When it came time to talk about pain management and comfort care, they made choices without consulting me. I would find out later, sometimes from Elizabeth herself, that they had changed her medication or adjusted her schedule without ever mentioning it to me. It hurt. I will not pretend it did not. I was her husband. I had been by her side every single day, through every treatment and every sleepless night. But to them, I was still the outsider. I was still the man who did not belong. I let it go. Fighting with them felt pointless when the woman we all loved was slipping away. I did not have the energy to argue for inclusion in conversations or for being consulted on decisions. Every ounce of strength I had was focused on being there for Elizabeth, on making whatever time she had left as comfortable and peaceful as possible. If the girls wanted to take the lead on medical decisions, I let them. If they wanted to shut me out of conversations with doctors, I stepped aside. None of it mattered compared to losing her. The only thing that mattered was being by her side when she needed me. In her final days, when it became clear that the treatments were no longer working and there was nothing more the doctors could do, Elizabeth asked to come home. We set up a hospital bed in the living room near the big window that looked out over the backyard. She had always loved that view. I wanted her to be able to see it all. I slept on the couch beside her bed so I could be there if she needed anything in the middle of the night. The girls took turns sitting with her during the day, and for a little while, the house felt peaceful. There was no fighting, no tension, just the quiet presence of people who loved her gathering close as her time ran out. One evening, when the girls had gone upstairs and the house was still, Elizabeth reached out and took my hand. Her grip was weak, barely more than a flutter of fingers against my palm, but I held on like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. She looked at me with tired eyes and asked me to promise her something. She said she knew her daughters were not ready to stand on their own. They were 19, legally adults, but still so young in so many ways. They did not have the tools to navigate the world without her, and she was afraid of what would happen to them after she was gone. She asked me to take care of them. She asked me not to abandon them, even if they pushed me away, even if they said hurtful things, even if they made it clear they did not want me in their lives. She believed that one day they would need someone, and she wanted that someone to be me. I sat there with tears running down my face, unable to speak for a long moment. This woman, who had spent years caught between her love for me and her love for her daughters, was asking me to keep trying even after she was gone. She was asking me to carry a burden that she knew would be heavy, to love people who might never love me back, to stay when walking away would be so much easier. I looked into her eyes and told her that I would do it. She squeezed my hand one more time, just a small, weak squeeze, and closed her eyes. 3 days later, she passed away in that hospital bed, with the morning light coming through the window and all three of us by her side. And even in that moment, as we said goodbye to the woman we all loved, the girls stood on one side of the bed and I stood on the other, separate, even in grief. The funeral was held on a gray Saturday morning at a small chapel not far from our house. Elizabeth had not been particularly religious, but she had always liked the look of that old stone building with its tall windows and quiet garden out back. I made the arrangements myself because the girls were in no state to do so, and because I wanted to make sure everything was exactly how she would have wanted it. I picked out the flowers and chose the music. I wrote something to say at the service, though when the time came to stand up and speak, the words felt hollow in my mouth. How do you sum up a person's life in a few minutes? How do you explain what someone meant to you when your throat is so tight you can barely breathe? I got through it somehow, though I do not remember much of what I said. I just remember looking at the casket and thinking that none of this felt real. After the service, people came back to the house. Friends, neighbors, co-workers, people I barely recognized but who said they had known Elizabeth from one place or another. They filled the living room and the kitchen, speaking in low, respectful voices. They told me how sorry they were. They told me that Elizabeth was in a better place now. They told me to call if I ever needed anything, though I knew most of them would never hear from me and I would never reach out. That is just what people say at funerals. It is the script we all follow because no one knows what else to do in the face of death. I nodded, thanked them, shook hands, and accepted hugs from people whose names I could not remember. Taylor and Jasmine stayed in their old bedroom for most of it, only coming out when someone specifically asked to see them. When the last guest finally left and the house was quiet again, I sat down on the couch and stared at the wall for a long time. The silence was deafening. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Grief is a strange thing. It does not hit you all at once. It comes in waves, sometimes small and manageable, sometimes so big they knock you off your feet. I thought the girls and I might lean on each other during this time. We had all lost the same person and were all drowning in the same grief. I thought that maybe now, with Elizabeth gone, we could find some common ground. I was wrong. Less than 2 weeks after the funeral, Taylor and Jasmine asked to speak with me. They said they had something important to discuss. I thought maybe they wanted to talk about their mother, to share memories or ask questions about the final days. I sat down at the kitchen table across from them, ready to listen, ready to be there for them the way Elizabeth had asked me to be. What came next caught me completely off guard. Jasmine did most of the talking. She sat with her back straight and her hands folded on the table in front of her, and she spoke in a tone that was calm and measured, almost rehearsed. She told me that she and Taylor had been thinking about the future and about what was fair now that their mother was gone. She said that the house we were sitting in had been their family home, where their mother had lived. She said the business, the landscaping company I had built over 20 years, was something their mother had helped run, and therefore something they had a claim to. She said that everything, the house, the business, the savings, all of it, should go to them. They were Elizabeth's daughters, they were her blood, and I was just a man who had been married to their mother for 4 years. I sat there in silence, trying to process what I was hearing. They told me to sign everything over and walk away. They said it would be the decent thing to do. They said that if I had any respect for their mother, I would not fight them on this. Their words were cold and sharp, as if they had rehearsed this conversation in private, maybe more than once. There was no emotion in their voices, just entitlement and the assumption that I would roll over and give them what they wanted because they believed they deserved it. Part of me wanted to stand up and shout at them. Part of me wanted to remind them of everything I had done for their mother and for them over the past 4 years. And now, less than 2 weeks after burying the woman I loved, they were sitting across from me, demanding that I give up everything I had built. But another part of me that was still raw and broken from losing Elizabeth could not find the strength to fight. I thought about the promise I had made to her in those final days. I had told her I would take care of her daughters. If I started a war with them right now, in this kitchen, in the middle of all this grief, I would be breaking that promise before the dirt on her grave had even settled. So I did not yell or argue. When they finished, I told them I needed time to think. I stood up from the table and walked out of the room without saying another word. Behind me, I heard them whispering to each other, but I did not turn around. I just kept walking, because I did not know what else to do. A few weeks after that conversation in the kitchen, I received an envelope in the mail from a law firm I had never heard of. The return address was from a small office about 20 minutes away, and when I opened it, I found a formal letter informing me that Taylor and Jasmine had retained legal counsel and were pursuing claims against the estate. The letter was written in stiff legal language, full of phrases like rightful inheritance, equitable distribution, and assets acquired during the marriage. It demanded that I respond through my own attorney and warned of further legal action if I failed to cooperate. I had just buried my wife. I was still waking up every morning and forgetting for a split second that she was gone, only to have the grief hit me all over again. And now her daughters were threatening to take me to court. I called my attorney the next day. His name was Phil, and he had helped me with business matters over the years. I explained the situation to him. He listened without interrupting, asked a few clarifying questions, and then explained that Taylor and Jasmine's lawyer should have conducted the basic research any attorney would before pursuing a case like this. Phil added that any competent lawyer would run these basic checks before moving forward with a case. Title searches and business filings are public records. They are not hidden or hard to find. It takes at most a few hours to pull the information and confirm who owns what. Attorneys do their homework before sending demand letters. They do not walk into legal proceedings blind. Taylor and Jasmine refused to accept the outcome. Instead of stepping back and letting go, they doubled down. They contested the will, claiming that I had exerted undue influence over their mother during her illness. They accused me of manipulating her, of isolating her from her daughters, of taking advantage of a dying woman to secure control of her estate. These accusations were not just legally baseless, they were painful. They painted me as a villain, as someone who had preyed on their mother rather than loved her. I had spent her final months caring for her, and now her daughters were telling lawyers and courts that I was the bad guy. The legal battle dragged on for 14 months. It was slow, tedious, and emotionally draining. There were depositions where I had to sit in a conference room and answer questions about my marriage while a stenographer typed every word. There were endless stacks of paperwork, motions and counter-motions, requests for documents, and legal briefs that my attorney had to prepare and file. There were phone calls and emails that stretched on for weeks, each one adding to the mounting legal fees. The whole process felt like being slowly crushed under a weight that never let up. My attorney urged me to fight back harder. He wanted me to countersue for defamation and to go after them for the legal fees they were costing me. He said I had a strong case and that I should make them pay for the damage they were doing. But every time I considered it, I thought about Elizabeth. I thought about the promise I had made to her in her final days. If I went to war with them, if I tried to destroy them financially and legally, I would be breaking that promise. So I told Phil to defend me, but not to escalate. I would not be the one to throw the first punch. I would protect what was mine, but I would not burn everything down in the process. Somewhere in the middle of all the legal chaos, something unexpected came to light. During the discovery process, in which both sides are required to share relevant documents, a letter was admitted into evidence. It was a letter Elizabeth had written to me during her illness, tucked away in a drawer with instructions for me to receive it after her passing. It was a deeply personal letter, and I had never intended for it to become part of a legal case. But once it was submitted as evidence, there was no taking it back. In the letter, Elizabeth thanked me for my patience with her daughters. She acknowledged, in her own handwriting, how difficult they had made my life. She wrote about the years of cold shoulders and hurtful words, about the way they had refused to accept me, no matter how hard I tried. She said it was unfair, and she apologized for not being able to fix it. She wrote that she trusted me completely, not just with her heart, but with her estate and with her daughters. She asked me, one final time, not give up on them. She believed that one day, when their grief had softened and they had gained more life experience, they would come to see me for who I really was. She believed they would appreciate the man who had stood by their mother until the very end. The letter did not change the legal outcome of the case. It was not a binding document that altered the terms of the will or shifted ownership of any assets. But it was a testament to the love and trust that Elizabeth had placed in me, written in her own words during a time when she knew she was dying. When Taylor and Jasmine received copies of the letter through their legal counsel, there was no dramatic moment of speechless realization. There was just silence. For days, I heard nothing from their side. No filings, no motions, no aggressive emails from their lawyer. Just silence. I do not know what they felt when they read their mother's words. I do not know if it changed anything inside them. But for a little while, the fighting stopped. The case eventually came to an end. The will stood as written. The house and the business remained mine. Taylor and Jasmine had spent a significant amount of money on legal fees chasing claims that were never valid in the first place. I had spent money too, more than I care to think about, defending myself against accusations that should never have been made. When it was all over, I was exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. I had been grieving my wife while simultaneously fighting her daughters in court. I had been treated like a criminal when all I had ever done was love their mother and try to be part of their family. And now, even though I had won, I did not feel like a winner. I just felt empty. After the dust settled, I reached out to both of them. I sent emails and left voicemails to let them know I was not their enemy. I offered to help with their remaining college costs, their rent, their car payments, whatever they needed to get on their feet as young adults. I told them that my door was always open and that whenever they were ready to talk, I would be there. I did this because I had promised Elizabeth I would. I did this because, despite everything, I did not want to give up on them. Jasmine was the first to respond, though it took several months. She did not apologize for what she had done. She did not acknowledge the pain she had caused, but she accepted my offer of help. She let me pay for her final semester of college. She sent me occasional updates about her life, short and awkward messages that felt more like an obligation than a genuine connection. But it was something. It was a crack in the wall that had stood between us for so long. Taylor, on the other hand, wanted nothing to do with me. She blocked my number. She made it clear, through her silence, that I was dead to her. Whatever chance we might have had at reconciliation was gone, at least for now. It was not the ending I had hoped for. It was not the ending Elizabeth had believed would come, but it was the reality I had to live with. It has been a few years now since Elizabeth passed away, and since the legal battle with her daughters came to an end. I still live in the same house, the one where we built our life together. I still run the same business, though I have slowed down a bit and let my team take on more responsibility. I think about Elizabeth every single day. I think about the promise I made to her in her final days, and I wonder if I have done enough to honor it. Jasmine and I still talk, though our conversations are far from easy. We are not close, not by any measure, but she allows me to be part of her life in small, careful ways. She tells me about her job. She sends me pictures sometimes. She even visited once, though she only stayed for a few hours. It is not the relationship I hoped for, but it is something, and I hold on to it because it is all I have. Taylor remains a closed door. I do not know where she is living now or what she is doing with her life. I do not know whether she ever thinks about me or about what she said during those dark months. I do not know if she will ever come around or if that relationship is lost forever. Some days, I make peace with it. Other days, the not knowing eats at me. There are moments when the resentment creeps in. I would be lying if I said it did not. There are nights when I lie awake and replay the things they said to me, the accusations, the demands, the coldness. There are times when I wonder why I ever tried so hard for people who never gave me a chance. But then I think about Elizabeth, and I remind myself that I did not do it for them. I did it for her. I did it because she asked me to, because she believed in them even when they gave her no reason to, and because loving her meant loving the people she loved, even when they did not love me back. I do not know what the future holds. I do not know if things will ever get better with Jasmine or if Taylor will ever speak to me again. All I can do is keep my door open and hope that one day they will walk through it. So now I ask you, what would you do if you found yourself in a situation like this? If you lost the love of your life and her children, the ones you tried for years to connect with, turned against you and demanded everything you had built, what would you do? Would you fight back with everything you had, protecting yourself and your legacy at all costs? Or would you try to honor the wishes of the woman you loved, keeping the door open for reconciliation even after being treated so poorly? Would you keep reaching out, year after year, hoping that time would heal what words could not? Or would you walk away, protect your peace, and accept that some relationships are simply not meant to be? There is no right answer here. That is what makes situations like this so difficult. Life does not hand us easy choices or clear paths forward. Sometimes, all we can do is make the best decisions we can with the information we have and hope that, in the end, we did enough. Let me know in the comments what you would have done. And as always, thank you for listening.